Let us pray. Father, we thank you so much for an opportunity to come and begin to unpack some of the issues in our community that are related to violence, public safety. Thanks for all the presenters who are here. Thanks for Patrick, who actually assembled this gathering tonight. And we ask now that your Spirit be with us as we dive into the conversation. We pray in your Son's name. Amen. Now, please help me welcome solo artist, Miss Kathy Townsend. Kathy.
Thank you, Elder. Good evening, everyone. So good to have you in our house tonight, in the house of God. So I'm just going to do a little song just to bless you in your goings and comings daily, because we all need it, don't we? Oh yeah, everybody's got a story in this place. No complaints and no regrets. I still believe in chasing dreams and placing bets, but I know that all you is all you get, so give it all you have. I have my share, I drink my fill, and even though I'm satisfied, I'm only still to see what's down another road beyond the hill and do it all again. So here's to love and every joy it brings. Here's to dreamers and their dreams. Funny how the time does fly, how love can go from warm hellos to sad goodbyes. I'm leaving with the memories, leave your eyes to keep your winters warm. For there's no less in yesterday. Who knows what tomorrow brings or takes away? As long as I'm still in the game, I want to play for life, for love. So here's to love and every joy it brings. So here's to love for dreamers and their dreams. May all your storms be weathered, all that's good get better. Here's to life, here's to love, here's to you. May all your storms be weathered, He's to love. He's to May you have a safe and happy holiday. Here's to love. God bless you. Thank you so much. God bless you.
Thank you, Kathy. Just a little taste of what we get to enjoy here at Shiloh. Listen, my name is Travis Price. I'm the head elder here at Shiloh, and I want to take the time to just welcome and greet each and every one of you that took the time to come out this evening. On behalf of our pastor, John T. Boston II, who could not be here this evening. He wanted to be here, but he was in a vehicle accident over the weekend. And at present, his wife has control of his phone and his calendar to make sure he gets some rest. So on behalf of him, the Shiloh Church family, we want to welcome you. Just to give you a little bit of history about this church, Shiloh Church, and the school next door. We've been serving this community for over 100 years. We established this building back in the 60s at a time when there was a little bit of racial strife and turmoil in this city. But the leaders of this church at this time had a vision that we would build this building to serve this community. And I don't know if you noticed when you came through the front doors, there are 3 angels on the facade of this building. And in the 1960s, they decided to melanin infuse these angels. And so if you look up there when you make your way out, you'll see angels that look a little bit like us. And it was a testament to the element of inclusiveness that they wanted. Inclusiveness in a religion that often marginalized people of color. And so just to let you know, this church was built and established to do just that in this community. And it is in that vein that we are honored to host the gathering this evening that Patrick Brutus put together. And so I don't want to take any more of his time. At this time, I want to introduce Patrick Brutus and the individuals that he will bring to us this evening because we want to hear what they have to say as we take this community and this city to new heights and new levels. At this time, Patrick Brutus, once again, welcome.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. Okay, I'm glad you all came out this evening. Give yourselves a round of applause for coming out on a cold evening in Chicago. So tonight we're going to talk about public safety. You all know I'm running for Alderman of the 6th Ward. I hope to win. I hope to, be the servant leader that this community needs. There's going to be somebody new. Why not me? And so, I'm putting it all on the line, and we're going to talk about the issues that are important, that the people care about, and that hopefully together we can solve to make the 6th Ward, the neighborhood, the ward, the communities, and all the places where we live, shop, and play, the place to be in Chicago. Let's make the 6th Ward the jewel of the South Side. That's my goal, and that's why I'm running. Okay, I do this. I work for the city. I want to be full disclosure. And in my time with the city, I've done a lot all over the city. But I want to do it here where I live, where I work, where my kids go to school, and where I worship. Just like you, I'm working very hard to make sure that where we live is a place where people want to come and spend money and educate their children and buy a property and make investments. So that's why I'm running, and I'm glad you're here. Thank you for coming. All right, so I released my public safety plan a couple of months ago, and for those of you who haven't seen it, I'm going to just play the video right now, and then we'll come back and introduce the panel.
I'm Patrick Brutus, candidate for Alderman of the 6th Ward, and I want to share with you my public safety plan. With all the ongoing aldermanic retirements, there will be numerous candidates seeking to become members of Chicago's City Council. What will they all have in common? They will all have to answer the essential question: how do you plan to make your ward safer? Shootings have become commonplace. and sadly normalized as either good or bad, depending on the previous week or year-to-year comparisons. For example, in Chicago's primarily black neighborhoods, citywide, during the September 9 weekend, there were 28 shot and 7 killed. This was followed by the September 16 weekend, where we experienced 59 shot and 10 killed. Labor Day weekend had 55 shootings and 11 killed, making this a very deadly month for our citizens. October hasn't started out any better, as in this month, we have 96 shot with 15 killed so far. In Chatham, where I live, so far this year, shootings have totaled 71 with 16 killed. This number does not include unreported incidents where guns have been brazenly used to intimidate patrons visiting our commercial districts and residents simply trying to enjoy another summer in our wonderful rooftop community. The 6th Ward used to be where our residents would be amongst the safest in the city. Historically, a very safe enclave of neighborhoods with manicured lawns and wonderful neighbors, our residents wouldn't think twice about walking their dogs, walking to schools, or walking to Chatham Foods, the local grocery store that used to be on 79th and Calumet. Furthermore, Park Manor, Chatham, and West Chesterfield used to be the neighborhoods that ranked lowest on lists that detailed crime rate. Now, due to the outbreaks of weekly violence that run rampant all across our city, our residents no longer feel that sense of security and safety. As we approach 500 killings in our city, Chicagoans continue to demand better safety measures for our children, neighbors, and our businesses. The answer to this dilemma cannot be solved just by pouring money into anti-violence programs and hoping that those who perpetrate crime are magically reinformed. The answer lies in a well-coordinated strategy that includes a wide array of actions that dramatically reduce crime, reform violent offenders, and restore neighborhoods back to the safe spaces they once were. However, we must also reinvest in local service providers and provide the funding directly to those in the community who are prepared to increase their capacity in resolving conflicts on the south and west sides. Because each neighborhood has their own sets of issues that are unique to their respective communities, the plan to resolve these issues should be locally driven. It's been long proven that in the black community, when familiarity and trust exist, leaders who rise to the occasion to confront and mediate conflicts, the result is a decline in disruptive incidents. For years, we have witnessed outside program providers show inconsequential results which have not delivered dramatic reductions in violent incident metrics for the money awarded to and spent by these outside groups. Therefore, it's time for a new approach to mitigating violence. Reduce, reform, restore, and reinvest. And let's give experienced people a real fighting chance to save our community and bring it back to the safe place we once knew. I'm Patrick Brutus, and I endorse this message.
All right, thank you. That's my safety plan, but I want to caution you that that's simply the beginning of an idea that I believe in strongly, but that also can be shaped by the voices of the residents of the 6th Ward. That's why your input tonight in this conversation about how do we get to where we want to go is going to be critically important to us, as we're all going to be taking notes and getting the essential feedback that is necessary for us to have the neighborhood that we want to have. Okay? So with me tonight, I'm going to introduce them. Come up here and sit down with me, and we're going to have a conversation about the issues that we're all facing together. I've invited some very good people here this evening, and I'm going to introduce them right now. Anthony Bryan. Let's welcome him to the stage. Anthony Bryan. Anna Maria Sokovic. Anna Maria Sokovic. Jim Blissett III. These people are running for Police 3rd District Council. We've also got David Boykin. David Boykin is running for District 6 Police Council. Dion McGill. And then we also have Craig T. Carrington. Craig T. Carrington. So Deanna is running for District 7, Police Council, and Craig, Mr. Carrington, is running for District 3. Okay? So our 6th ward covers 3 police districts. The 3rd district, the 6th district, and the 7th district. Also joining us this evening, Rodney Johnson, president of the 7400 South Indiana Block Club. Charles Perry, impact leader for the Kindness Campaign. Kenny Smith, is a security expert. He lives in the ward and gets down all over the place. And lastly, it is my pleasure to introduce to you Dr. Amina Matthews. Yeah, come on. We'll find a chair for you. Dr. Matthews is the CEO and founder of Pause for Peace. She's also located in the 6th ward, and she's put her name on the line in the past. Okay. Right. All right. We'll get you up on any chairs. All right. So thank you all for joining this conversation this evening. All right. Thank you. So last summer, we had an incident on 75th Street that for us was a flashpoint in what's really going on in our community, and that was the shooting outside of the nightclub Francis last summer. Okay. That was a sign to us that really the crime was really rising in our neighborhood, and it became, I think, an eye-opener for us. And so, Rodney Johnson, the president of the Block Club on 74th in Indiana, has been very instrumental in trying to raise awareness, but not only that, and I'll let him speak, but also working in the community to figure out what solutions we need together to drive down the violence. You got a microphone over here, Rodney. And I'm going to introduce you to Rodney Johnson. And Rodney, go ahead.
Okay. Well, good evening, everybody. My name, as he said, is Rodney Johnson, and I'm a member of this community pretty much since I was born. For the first 6 months of my life, I lived on 74th and Calumet. And when my parents were able, they bought a house that I still live in today on 74th in Indiana. So, Elder, I remember those Black Angels when we used to ride our bikes down here because it was such a fresh look, you know, as a young kid, 10 years old, 12 years old, seeing that when I was like way ahead of the curve to see black of any kind on churches. But we've witnessed some issues in our community as it relates to the changes that have been happening with guns and the pandemic. And I would just differ just slightly with Patrick when he talked about the shooting that took place where the young lady was killed right between Limbs and the parking lot of Limbs and Francis's nightclub. But that was really the build-up, unfortunately, of what had been happening for a good while, where mobs of young people, and you know, unfortunately, I can't even say they was that young when we look at some of the pictures, but there would be so many people on 75th Street that it would be as many people close to each other, literally, as we are up here on this stage, shoulder to shoulder. And just imagine the whole street, the sidewalk, from Prairie all the way down to Calumet and even a little bit going towards Indiana, just full of people. Partying, drinking, not obeying police, twerking on top of police cars. We have all this on video. Twerking on the street poles, using them as stripper poles, saying this is the new Bourbon Street. You know, that's literally what converged on 75th Street. But really, that's not the whole story, because these people obviously had to get there with vehicles. So their vehicles were all over our blocks, in our alleys. Motorcycles driving up and down, you know, our sidewalks, people urinating in our bushes, having sex on the steps of people's homes, in the driveways. One of my neighbors, she's not here today, her daughter was coming home right when a guy was urinating in the bushes, and he said, hey, you can't do that. And I don't know if he had a cup or whatever, but somehow or another he threw the urine on her, you know. And so these are obviously people who don't live in our community. They're not residents of Park Manor, they're not residents of Chatham. They're just converging to this area. You know, 75th Street, at that point, just became the place. So we had a number of discussions about it, and before, unfortunately, the lady was killed, she was killed on that Friday night going into Saturday morning. We had a community meeting in my house on the front lawn, and, you know, we didn't invite the police, but I guess the police came, and it was really just a meeting for us to, you know, talk about it. You know, my neighbors in the back who live on my block, Brian and Kim, we organized some things, and it was as a result of that meeting that I got a chance to meet Anthony, who's a hard worker in the community. And it just so happened that the police showed up, and they told us that they had a plan. They laid out the plan that they were going to put all this police security on 75th Street for the weekend. And the first part of that night, or that early evening, it worked as planned. They did everything. They were going up and down 75th Street with megaphones, making people move. But when the shift changed, when you really needed the enforcement, I mean, how much enforcement do you really need? 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock in the afternoon, leading up to 7, because, you know, like Richard Pryor said, the party's not going to start until later, right? So once that happened, the new shift, they didn't do that. They weren't making people move along. They weren't making people stop drinking. And the mass, again, came together, and a person wound up shooting the lady and killing her right in front of Lim's parking lot. So we've been very involved ever since that time. That was the summer of 2021. We actually started working with the police, and they came up with a plan to increase the force on 75th Street, which they did initially. They did a very good job. They had 2 cars posted at 75th and Prairie. You know, 75th Street is the dividing line between the 6th District Police Station, which is on the south side, and the north side of 75th Street is the 3rd. So they had, you know, a person, well, 4 people really, because there were 2 people in each squad car, posted from the 6th and the 3rd. Then they had this really bright light that they put up that made it look like 12 o'clock in the afternoon at midnight. It was just great. And then for, I think, a good 2 weekends, they had a massive number of police that were just up and down 75th Street. So the message was sent, you know, you didn't want to come and mess around. For the rest of that summer, everything was fine. Well, lo and behold, this summer came around, and the very first warm day that we had this summer, I think it was in March, wasn't that in March? April? Okay, April. Police just forgot what they did the previous year, and the crowd came back out again, and there were like 50 gunshots that rang out on that particular, I think it was a Saturday. And it was only by the grace of God that nobody was killed and 2 people got shot. And when we met with the police at that time, you would have thought that they would have been eager to start the plan that they had the previous year, re-implemented. But we started getting all kind of pushback from both the 3rd and the 6th commanders. Well, we're short-staffed. We don't have the people like we had then. We don't have the overtime like we did then. And it's been a real battle. We were promised cameras from the Alderman, which have never been put up. We actually did have a portable camera that was there, and with a car accident, it got knocked down. And for whatever reason, the city, with all of its resources, couldn't bring another portable camera back up. So it's just been disappointing for many of us who've come together and working with the police. And to that end, we didn't decide to stop working with the police, but a number of us have just continued to meet amongst ourselves, because trying to work with the police just really wasn't getting anywhere, and to continue what we're doing to come up with a plan. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention the liquor establishments that are on 75th Street that, you know, are attracting a lot of this element. You know, it's not like we haven't had liquor establishments over the course of time. Like I said, I'm 61 years old, so my father knew the bar owners. I mean, they're bars that are no longer around. The Urbanite, which is now the hair care place on 75th Division. Yeah, new apartment lounge. Yeah, Lurlene's, which used to be right across the alley from Limbs, is now the Evans Club. So there were a number of, you know, speakeasies, whatever you want to call them, but they didn't attract the element that's being attracted today, right? And that's the issue. And, you know, as residents and neighbors, is that these liquor establishments have to take more responsibility for the people that they are attracting to this area, because the things that their patrons and their patrons who are bringing their cousins and things like that are doing things that we just haven't seen, you know, prior to this point. So, so that's where we are. We're continuing to meet. And let me just end with this. It's so important to have block clubs, you know, and because if you don't know your neighbors, then you don't have the ability to unify. You know, you don't have the ability to start coming together. And that's one great thing that's happened with this whole piece. You know, one block club after another have come together, and that's really what's allowed us to have a lot of the momentum that we have currently. So, with that.
Folks, Patrick forgot to introduce me here today as the moderator. He was so excited to get you guys started and to get you talking that we were remiss in that. So first and foremost, I'm Cindy Newman. I work on the Friends of Patrick Brutus campaign. And I wanted to just give everyone on the panel an opportunity, just a brief introduction. We're going to keep it at about 20 seconds. And I think, honestly, the reason that Patrick forgot to introduce me is because I am the one that's going to hold you to that time. So when I start doing this, we know that it's time to pass that mic. Okay? So I'm going to start down here on the end.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Charles Perry, and I'm part of the Kindness Campaign right on 701 East 75th Street, and we do the fresh food market every Thursday. We're in this community because, for myself, I grew up at 7340 South Calumet, and so I was around when Alderman Lou's was around, and even everything. This was a wonderful, beautiful neighborhood, and but you know, we can bring it back that way. So just so you know, we're there. We have workforce development, workforce training, and we're here. We don't look at the people we serve as clients. We look at them as beneficiaries to what we're beneficiaries of, because we're using other folks' money to supply this community. And our goal is to put a fresh food market back in the community.
Hi, my name is Kenny Smith, and I grew up in Inglewood. I moved to this area in 1985, bought my first building on 69th and Calumet in 1985. I'm a developer. Let me back up a little bit. I have been working as a radiographer since 1980. So I worked at Northwestern Memorial Hospital for 26 and a half years, University of Chicago for 11. And at the same time, getting a second degree in business law at Roosevelt University, and being trained 4 years under Bill Clinton at the Metcalf building on how to redevelop communities. My first development was on 61st in Princeton. I have a very unique background. Met Dr. Martin Luther King as he walked by me in 66, right before he marched in Marquette Park. And Gage Park. My brother's in the Black Panthers, graduated from Inglewood High School. And it was while I was working at Northwestern, I started running into doctors that had been to Europe, where they had a 95% reduction in all crime. So in 1996, I designed what, if you don't know me, you know my work. All the video cameras were started at OUMC, I designed the whole system. I did it for Inglewood. We're supposed to have cameras on every public street in LA. We're doing real good, and working under Terry Hiller, he gave me access to everything, so I was presenting it to Inglewood. Did the pilot in my mother's house on 65th and Princeton for it. Hired Siemens Corporation, which is $103.2 billion corporation, state net worth, and they worked with me, so they installed the system. But what I did not plan on running into was, and I'm gonna just be honest with you, was a police union. Threatened the mayor, you better not put cameras on every public street and alley, and that's the real fight. Doing that, they see us as a commodity. Gotta keep the prisons full, gotta keep crime up, so when that census money comes through, then it winds up somewhere else. But right now, we have an opportunity to change all of that. I'm working with city colleges and workforce development, and I'm also going to be developing housing. But I've got the feds helping me to update the system and come at it again. In Europe, they had a 95% reduction in crime, was able to lay off 30% of the police department and require bachelor's degrees for everybody, and then train every police officer on the level of IFBI. They had terrorists and they had worse crime than we did, and they took a tell us. I said, why not bring that to the United States? Why not start my own community? So right now, that's what we're re-upping to do, and that's where my experience comes from.
Good evening, everyone. My name is David Boykin. I'm a musician and an educator from the west side of Chicago, but I've lived 75th and Everhard for the past 12 years, and I'm running for the 6th District Police Council.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Craig T. Carrington. I'm a 5th generation Chicagoan that grew up in this area. I am running for the 3rd District Police Council. I have over 25 years of community outreach experience. Currently, I work for the Restorative Justice Community Court in Inglewood as a community court case manager. It's a specialty court designed to give people a second chance. Prior to that, I was a court liaison in the Adult Probation Department under the Office of the Chief Judge. I'm also a certified paralegal that has expunged and seals people's criminal record. And for those individuals whose records can be expunged and sealed, I prepared what they call an executive clemency hearing form. Prior to that, I was a community organizer for St. Anthony Hospital. I have to say, I was one of the first people to identify the mental health crisis here in Chicago. I put together the first forum in 2020 that addressed mental health, behavioral health, and substance abuse disorder that affects the Black community and Hispanic community. I'm the golden voice of Chicago, the voice of the voices, and the voice that counts.
How's it going, everyone? All right, my name is Jim Blissett III, and my great-grandparents purchased property on 73rd and Wabash, 7332 South Wabash. Booker T. Bard and Rachel Bard, you know, beautiful, beautiful family, raised a number of great kids. My grandmother, she was a vocalist with the Black ensemble, Audrey Queen Wicks, and previously Audrey Queen Roy. And she performed at the 50-yard line when it was a go-to. You know, it was a regular. We loved the fact that my grandmother was respected. My great-grandparents were respected, built churches throughout the community, and it was a point of pride for me, even to this day. So that became the wind at my back as I matured and grew, not only in Park Manor, but also living throughout Inglewood. You know, I went off to Alabama A&M, where I, learned to love service. And service and sovereignty was our motto, you know, and when I left A&M, I came back to DePaul and I was introduced to the Urban League. You know, I worked at the Chicago Urban League for 5 years and developed social emotional learning programs. We hosted the police board forums where we heard the community's voice as it relates to the execution of Laquan McDonald. And from that, we pushed the city to creating, a better perspective as it relates to oversight of policing. So now here I stand, a doctoral student at DePaul, looking at restorative approaches and then accessing vocational opportunities, as well as someone working in the cannabis space as a social equity applicant, pushing for inclusion and pushing for the benefits of cannabis to touch our communities. So how are we going to do this? I love the fact that Frank Chapman with Carver and ECPS, the coalition, fought to introduce real police oversight from a community perspective. So I stepped up and I accept the challenge as a candidate for 3rd Police District. Not only am I a millennial, I'm from the community and I'm interested in learning from our elders, the work that's worked in the past. How can we fuse that with new ideas? How can we be proactive in using technology, video, camera systems, SEL interventions, approaching justice through a restorative approach? How are we going to incorporate the community voice? So I'm here, I want to hear what you all have to say. Lean on me as a resource as I lean on you all. You can learn more about me at thirdpolicedistrict.com. Again, my name is Jim Blissett III. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. My name is Anna Sokovic. As you can hear, I'm not from here, right, originally. I moved to the South Shore 2 years ago, and immediately I felt, at home. I share a deep love, for my community, and I always felt the need to contribute to the community, and I think this is a perfect chance. So I would like to say a little bit about me. So by education, I am a computational scientist, and that gives me a special skill set, like to look into the data which will tell the story. How police is policing us, the people, who they are supposed to serve and protect. And moreover, how the policing, budget is spent in our community. Is the budget, equally, distributed? We need to look into the numbers. So that will be the basis, of my work, right? To check, to present, information with the facts, and to go from there. Next, as Jim, mentioned, people from, ECPS, fighted for years for this to be passed, in ordinance. So we really own them. We need to be really, committed to make the best of this. We are the first, generation of this, district councils, and we have great responsibility to do this right. And to bring up solutions in the policy from the people for the people. Okay, we need to speak the truth to the power. So I think, I will finish there. Thank you so much.
Hi, my name is Dr. Amina Matthews. I'm a community psychologist. My bio is, for the grace of the Creator. It's been amazing. I was born and raised on the south side of Chicago in Chatham. I went to Horace Mann Elementary School, Christ the King School down on King Drive, 80th and King Drive. Raised by my grandmother. My mother was a young teenager having a baby, and my grandmother was right there for me. And I really appreciate it. She made sure at the age of 30 she made sure that I wouldn't end up in the system. So from me understanding that, and when I was growing up, I don't know about you guys, but I was always faced by my dearest friends asking, what do you want to be when you grow up? What do you want to be when you grow up? They asked all of us. I mean, you couldn't get away from one of the elders without answering that question, what do you want to do when you grow up? I really didn't know. I just said what was, out there, a school teacher, things that I saw. I wanted to be a nurse, and back when I was growing up, it was walking papers for African Americans was being a librarian as a female, secretary or nurse as a female, garbage worker, streets and sand, as a male. And I didn't I just knew I wanted to be a good person. And as I traveled along my journey and became a mom and understood, the dynamics of my mother being a young mother and my father being a young community organizer, and was very misunderstood and ended up as a political prisoner and a political pawn here in this city of Chicago, I knew I wanted to be something of greatness. I knew I wanted to be something of change. I knew I wanted to be something that wouldn't be misunderstood as a Black woman coming from the lowings of the Great Migration from Mississippi up into these parts. So now, as I looked around and I saw the opportunities and I'm hearing restorative practicing, restorative justice, violence prevention, violence intervention. One thing that I did understand in watching my grandparents and watching the elders in our community, they always took care of the community. 79th and Bennett, we lived right there above the fish market across the street from Jordan's. And yes, it was a difficult, challenging time. And my grandmother had a lingerie store and it got robbed. She did call the police because she wanted to make sure that legally she would be okay, but what she did afterwards was that she went out in the community on 79th and Constance, 89th and Constance, Ridgeland, Jeffrey, all around, making sure that young kids would not get themselves in a predicament of legal ram. And I really thought that was admirable of her. And I really didn't want to be bothered with the community. I really didn't. But it just was something that will always pull this crazy person back out there in the community. So here up to date, in 2005, I was introduced to an organization called Ceasefire, which is now called Cure Violence. The community that I served, we did remarkable strides of violence prevention and holding our young men and our young women accountable to their seat on that bench in the park that we live in. So after that, we traveled the world. We tried to put some violence prevention programs in And why I'm here today is to listen and understand what each and every one of us will bring to the 6th Ward. That's really what time it is. So I thank you guys. I'm honored to be here. I appreciate it. I'm here to listen and learn. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. How you doing? Deanna McGill. I am the manager of communications and community outreach with Strengthening Chicago's Youth, which is Chicago's largest violence prevention collaborative. It's inside of Lurie Children's Hospital. So I do violence prevention work on behalf of the hospital. Before that, I worked with the Illinois Council Against Handgun Violence. I ran the education programs there. I worked with schools and students across the city, helping them amplify their voices in terms of advocacy, activism, specifically in response to gun violence that was happening in their communities. From there. Before that, I was a CPS teacher. I taught in Richards Career Academy back at the Yards, also a proud CTU member, taught 2 years in Alaska. Prior to that, I was in the Illinois Army National Guard for 9 years. So a majority of my professional career has been around violence prevention, public health, youth engagement, and community engagement. So I'm super excited to be up here with these amazing people, and also super excited to be a candidate in the 7th Police District for the District Council.
Hi everyone, my name is Anthony David Bryant. I'm running for the local police district council in the 3rd District. I am a public servant as well as a restorative justice practitioner. I currently work with Metropolitan Family Services as their government affairs associate, advocating for our FLIP program. You all may have heard of it in the Woodlawn community with Project Hood. So we help fund violence prevention programs, workforce development, domestic violence prevention, as well as early childhood development and behavioral health. Prior to working with that organization, I worked and volunteered with State Representative Lamont Robinson's office for the past couple of years. So during that time, we gave $10.3 million to Sunshine Ministries to expand their violence prevention work, as well as giving 10.3 to Project Hood to help them open up their community center. So those are 2 organizations that will be having community centers in the Woodlawn neighborhood. And prior to leaving, I actually wrote a $100 million proposal for African American communities, African American cultural community center in the Brownsville neighborhood. And that's just some of the organizations I work with. I work with the Tribe, right? The only, or one of the youngest and only Black-owned media news journalism company here that does work to educate people about relevant stories, about relevant issues that are going on in our community. So as a public servant, right, running for office is new. I'm not used to being the candidate. I'm used to just being the servant, doing my work, and just make sure that people are getting what they need. But as the candidate, I want to continue doing that work, working with public officials, working with community organizations, as well as business owners to ensure that we can address some of the root issues of crime in our neighborhoods. So thank you so much.
All right, thank you. Let's go ahead and get started. Just a warm and fuzzy reminder. We gotta give it up, okay? Patrick?
So what you have seen is a number of people here tonight working in community, and I think that's just an awesome thing. We heard from Rodney, we heard from everybody here, but you know what? We have seen increases in, historically, we've seen increases in crime in historically low areas, right? You know, Chatham didn't used to be like this. Or, you know, I know we always had, you know, perception that crime is out of control in Englewood, but for the most part, you know, between State Street and Cottage, 87th to 71st, it's been not that bad. We've been able to survive and overcome our challenges over the years, but now, you know, we're out of control, you know, in a way. And just want to let you know that we did invite the police department here this evening, and District 6 is unavailable, and 3 we just didn't hear back from Officer Lamont Lee, who's the CAPS officer who's there, but we'll have them out at, you know, future gatherings. But what is the crime? What is the crime, right? the murders and the shootings, you know, you heard in my video, we gave some statistics. That's citywide. We gave some stats for Chatham, but that's what makes the news, right? The murder, death, kill. But in our community here in the 6th Ward, you know, we have some statistics up here that we want to show on the screen. Hopefully the team is up there. We have it ready to go. Like in our community, what is prevalent is actually carjackings, right? And burglaries and robberies and home invasions. Those are the #1 incidents in the 6th Ward. And while the shootings are also very important, the day-to-day crime is what makes everyone feel unsafe. You know, during this campaign, and I'm sure my colleagues here have been hearing from neighbors who are challenged every day just to get into their property. They're facing violence in the alley, trying to park their cars, you know, lighting is insufficient. And so, like, we'll just pass the mic around here, and we want to, you know, hear from the folks here. Like, what are we doing? What are we witnessing? What are we seeing? And what are some of the interventions that we've been able to make at the really base level of just trying to maintain our personal safety, right? And we can start over here. Maybe you guys who are running for office can share with us your ideas about how to mitigate that. But certainly we want to, you know, hear from all of you at some point. We're going to turn the mic over for audience questions so that we have a two-way conversation. But first, let's try to address some of the aggravated batteries, the burglaries and thefts. We have statistics here that are the most recent for District 3, District 6, as well as District 7.
Hi, everyone. Again, my name is Anthony Bryant. So I think the main thing is looking at community safety, right? And how can we ensure that we have the adequate resources, right? Job opportunities, opportunities for entrepreneurship, as well as youth development programs, right? Spaces where the community can gather and peacefully, safely, and have good fun. I know Rodney was talking earlier about 75th and just how a lot of reactionary tactics are used by an institution that's been around for a long time, right? You know, we should have proactive matters with addressing those type of issues of people gathering, violating people's property, you know, carjackings. Actually, in the Woodline neighborhood, my car was actually broken in a couple of times this past fall. And I called the 3rd District just asking them for a simple strategy of sitting a squad car on the block in the middle of the night, right? And it's not just my car, right? You know, I think that's one thing that, you know, we should all understand. It doesn't have to happen to me for me to care. You know, my neighbor's cars is getting broken into, and he was telling me about it. Just like, hey, can we sit a squad car from 11 p.m. to at least 7 a.m.? And he was just like, oh, do you have a description of the guy? No, I wasn't expecting the guy to still be sitting in my car when I came. But if he was, I wouldn't have called you all. But I think it's just about how can we ensure resources to the community, but also how can we just tell the police to shift their strategy when it comes to keeping our community safe.
So, I have a question out here. We have a question. And if anyone else in the audience has questions, please let me know also.
Good evening. So I'll try to keep the question brief.
What's your name?
Anthony Crawford. So I think we all know, if maybe we don't, we might know after this, the violence in the street is the result of something else, which is usually the violence in the home. And so I go to a lot of these talks and I hear a lot of the things that people are saying. But the question is, it doesn't matter if you give $10 million to this group or $100 million to that group. How do you have the power to fix violence in someone's home? Because we're talking about we don't want to live in a police state. And so you can't go into the house and stop the violence. But yet we're constantly throwing money at an outside problem that started inside. So what's your guys' proposal there?
You are 100% correct. You know, what happens in the home will spill out into the streets. And we also spend a lot of time, majority of our time, in school buildings as well. So what's happening in the schools will spill out into the streets. How do we address this, right? We have to really look at our music, our videos, our television, what we're consuming, right? We can't police parents, we can't police adults, but those of us pushing for, universal, healthcare and other programs, how can we capitalize on meeting the issues where they are? When we're interacting with hospitals, when we're interacting with our psychologists and psychiatrists, are we taking that data and using it appropriately in the dispensing of resources? Dr. King spoke to this many years ago, right? We can't just throw money at it, but if we can put individuals in a position to access proper health care and access proper means to support your family, that alleviates some of the depression, that alleviates some of the trauma we're dealing with, right? Go back and look at what Dr. King spoke on as it relates to the poverty plan and the anti-poverty campaigns, right? I'm a big fan of universal basic income, so when you get to see, city council, I want y'all to look at that. But you're 100% correct. As we allow or afford access to health care, how are we using the data we're collecting, and are we addressing the mental health issues our parents are dealing with in the home?
That's, you're 100% right, yes. However, in me coming from a holistic point of view, and understanding, yes, what happens in the home reflects in the streets, in the school system, the lack of. So it just doesn't necessarily come from a home base. It comes from a thinking. So my responsibility as a public servant is to make sure that we educate on the front end about how it is to be that girl, be that child that was born from a young person that didn't have any tools of understanding what it is to be maternal and paternal. To understand that we are in a disparity of a community of lack. Our young black men and our young black women are underserved in our communities and have been underserved for a while. Now we're at this tipping point where there's been weapons of mass destruction let out on our train tracks, as well as given to our kids instead of a ball or a book. It is my responsibility to continue to educate our young people on what the setup of the design of our young black men and our young black women in the city of Chicago. So we must teach, we must encourage, we cannot judge. If we're not going to be on the front line to make decisions, to make change, then maybe we need to sit out of this game for a moment and then engage, or maybe not engage at all, or let the next public servant that can penetrate our young youth and their families, then only then change can happen. Only then restoration can happen. Only then we can pull our young men and our young women up without prejudice. Right now they feel that they're being judged. Right now they don't understand why. They know that this is either for them, kill or be killed. And we have to understand that this is the society that we live in, and we have to provide resources. We have to understand, we have to provide resources for the parents that does not have parental or maternal instincts. We have to be there and stand in the gap for our young men and our young women and their families. And that's what I really encourage from this community meeting, that we come together and we be one force reckon in the six to make sure that there's real change for our youth, so I can get my Social Security when it's time, so they can vote properly, and that's what our goal is. Thank you.
I just want to say,
I didn't come to ask a question. I came to share some information. To stop the violence real quick in the households, bring back the block grants. Those are 3 elders, one on each end and one in the middle, that know the families on the block. They will start. The second thing you do, because my ride is on the way, I'm not being mad. The second thing you do is start right now. Go to Walmart, get you some cardstock, put a telephone number on there that you're going to answer with your your favorite saying, and you give it to young people. Before you pick up a gun, call me and let's talk about it. Those are two things. I will get with y'all later, but you know my sister starts fussing if I know.
Thank you. Get home safely, please. I just want to add, just real quick, I'm sorry.
Sure. So, the problems of this community are not separated from the problems of this state and of this country, right? Weapons. How, anyone, anytime can just buy, weapons anywhere, right? We need to control how weapons are sold. Next thing, mental health, institutions. You know that in this state and in this country, state-funded mental institutions have been abolished. And you know why? Because they don't bring, profit. So, it is very obvious that people of this community will not get very soon help from the country or from the state. We need to get together as a community and find community-based solutions. But we also need to know that the gang violence and poverty, we cannot police our ways out of it. We need to seek, alternative solutions, right? We need to implement, robust, mental health, emergency, response, alternatives like 988, mental health, emergency, hotlines like, expansions of social workers, alternatives to police. We need to focus more on healing of communities instead of, retribution. That needs to be mindset. We need to first love each other. So that needs to be a starting point. But then also, safety problem, is multi-layered and depends on so many things, like the housing, problem with the housing, so many, empty lots. Problems, of people of young people primarily, not having anything to do, after school, after school programs, right? We need to find a way for the youth how to find meaning in their lives. And we need to find a way how for youth to realize that we care about them and that there is meaningful future for them. So that is the root of all of this. Thank you.
Patrick, I'm going to let you take the next comment, and then we have another question from the audience.
All right, real quick, I just wanted to address Mr. Crawford, and I agree, the foundation for your question is essential. It's essential. How do you, fix something that should be fixed at home, right? But I want to say, as Alderman, what I would do, and I agree with some of the comments here, because these are very good platforms we're hearing this evening, but as Alderman, what I would do is I would be pushing the administration to allocate more funding to some of these local operators. In my plan, part of it is reinvesting in local operators who understand our people better than the people downtown or the north side or from out of the city that are, I'm gonna say do-gooders. Y'all got me on camera now, but you understand what I'm saying. You understand the assignment when I say that. We got a lot of those folks who are doing the if-then, the academic approach, and they're proposing solutions, and there's money behind that stuff. But the money is not going to the local folks, like the Kindness Campaign, like the Pause for Peace, like block clubs. We gotta put the money where the people are having the greater impact, or the people that can have the greater impact because they know our people better. As Alderman, that's what I would do. Because you can't legislate crime, right? But we can put the money behind the right people who know how to solve those home problems, those mental health challenges, that speak our language, that understand our culture as black people in black neighborhoods, in black Chicago. We just gonna get the money and put it into the people. That's part of my plan, but you're absolutely right, Mr. Crawford. We gotta figure out how to fix the home situation first, because you're right, it's spilling out into the public arena. And then it's becoming a public service problem, and that's only taken care of or managed by police, the court system, and then we have that whole cycle, which is not really very good for our people historically,
and it becomes an epidemic of over-legislating our people. We gotta fix that, but I think if we put the money in the local, we can fix that. Because we got everything we need right here in our neighborhood.
Hello, my name is Brian Mullins. And I just want to make a couple of statements on what I'm hearing here. It's a great conversation. Appreciate all of it. But one of the things I haven't heard, actually Patrick just touched on it, which I'm glad to hear, is economics. I grew up 82nd in Blackstone, Avalon Park, 53 years resident of 8th Ward, and our communities were safe, right? And we all lived through and watched CHA tearing down the housing projects. We watched gang leaders being locked up, leaving groups of chaos on our blocks. We watched the war on drugs, right? We watched every mass incarceration. Mina mentioned dropping guns all over the place. But we talk about it like we did. We didn't do anything wrong, right? This is a calculated plan, orchestrated. And it's still at work as we speak today. So no amount of dollars on the side and these small, and smaller efforts in the climate we're in now, I think we need to come together and bring these resources. Patrick mentioned money. City of Chicago is about $60 billion entity on its own. $60 billion. And now we have other entities. We had the elected school board come in. We now have this police accountability board. But the mayor of Chicago, every single problem we talk about, CHA, CPS, CPD is under the control of one person. So we got all these other layers that we keep adding to accountability, right? It's accountable to that one person. So we hope, these kind of conversations are definitely needed, but just we gotta, we always come at this victim mentality when they are doing it to us. We didn't do anything wrong, but try to survive in the city. And all these systems are crushing us down as black people here in Chicago. And I think it's time to talk about the real problems, right? If we don't talk about them, they're just gonna roll over us. We could talk about it, this may not be the forum for it. We have cartel members in the middle of our city, right? And they come across the borders every day, right? And so we sit here and we look at drugs and guns coming to our city and we wondering, talking about what we did wrong. So just keep all these larger worldwide and citywide conversations in this mix, but it's all about the economics. If you can fix the economics of people who have been systemically locked out of any progress, all the crime problem will succeed over time. So I just want to give my 2 cents.
Some of those answers to those questions, to those issues are a few different things, right? Civic engagement, political engagement, time management, and also economic empowerment, right? With some of the things Brian has brought up, I think when we understand the importance to vote, like we have to vote, but not just vote. We have to be politically educated and engaged and informed to know who to vote for, right? Patrick running for Alderman of the 6th Ward, right? We need all the people who are going to go to the city hall and make sure that money from the city of Chicago comes back to these neighborhoods, to these police districts, so we can be able to have the power to help out our communities, right? I wanted to talk about economic empowerment, right? It's not just about getting jobs, right? Because we can get jobs where we work downtown, but we don't got jobs in our own neighborhoods, taking care of our own issues in our neighborhoods. So who's investing time in taking care of our neighborhoods if we're working downtown? No one, right? And with that, with that time management, right? We're not living in an age where one paycheck can take care of a family. Everyone in the family has to work. And if the 16-year-old knows how to work, guess what that 16-year-old is going to be doing, right? Getting money by any means necessary. So we don't have that time to spend with our youth, right, as parents. I'm not a parent, you know what I'm saying? I know I'm using y'all and we. But we have to understand that educators spend the most time with our youth. And if we're not respecting our educators in our neighborhood, then we're not respecting the people who has the direct impact on our youth. So I just wanted to say those things.
Thank you for your comments. Okay, we're gonna give you 20 seconds.
Just real quick. I'm gonna do it. I almost want to say I respectfully disagree. I don't think it's a disagreement, but we say this, you can't throw money at a problem, right? And we say that all the time. However, when you look at those numbers, if you look at dates, think about when 50 schools were closed in this city. And then think about when mental health facilities were closed in the city. And I tell you, if you watch the line of crime that starts to happen in the city, guess what it looks like? It looks like a hill I wouldn't be able to climb, right? I'm not in the best shape. But that's reality, and that's money. Now, it's not just throwing money. It has to be smart money. It has to be those resources. It has to be equitable. I was just at Henderson Elementary the other day, one of the most beautiful schools in this city. But if they had the same budget as Walter Payton, we'd be producing nothing but Harvard graduates out of that school. Because the teachers are working on string, right, to make magic happen. And those kids are coming out amazing. So it's not that I disagree, but we need the resources. But they need to be smart. They need to be equitable. They need to be going to the right things, to organizations who are doing the work, right? Not to someone's pocket. But we need it. I want more of it. So all our schools in this area can have the top budgets, and we can move from there.
Thank you. I have another question or comment from the audience. Okay.
Yeah, I like some of the comments that I'm hearing from everybody. Anthony, the gentleman who talked about living in Avalon area and the conspiracy that has happened against our community. And it's funny whenever we mention that word, people tense up, especially black people. But you got to remember, it was the police department along with the state's attorney who killed Fred Hampton, and across the whole country, this was a concerted conspiracy. You gotta realize it was a conspiracy to kill Martin Luther King, Malcolm X. So when it comes to our greatness, and I guess maybe I grew up in a bubble, living in this community in the 60s and 70s, but my grammar school that I went to right down the street, Deneen, I didn't have any teachers or administrators who didn't look like me or my family until I got to 7th grade. And so I can't tell you the amount of love that was constantly just being bestowed. From my 1st grade, 2nd grade, 3rd grade, everybody had expectations. I mean, it was like, if you had a problem with being hugged and kissed, you would have had, all kinds of problems growing up in this community. And that was just it was a common unity. When I talk, in other forums, in this forum, community, we have to understand it's about having a common unity. And that's something that we have to realize with all the detriments, like the brother said, that have come and pulled all that out of our communities. We have to start bringing that back. We have to start bringing back, and, like when you never know all the things that are the warfare that's being taking place against you. But it was clear to me in the mid-'80s that this rap music was going nowhere, right? And I remember back then it was cassette tapes, right? Away from my kids, and I'm like, no, you're not listening to that, and well, mommy bought it for me. Okay, I'm gonna talk to mommy, because it's just not, it can't have B's, holes, and, and now it's even worse, but all of these things are part of our demise of our communities, and we have to start taking back control of that narrative about, the self-image, so when Anthony talks about the things that are happening inside of the home, that's the problem with self-image. If it's a man beating on a wife, if it's a wife beating on a husband, they pulling out knives and guns and stuff, that comes from an image issue, and unfortunately, the image that we used to have when I came along was about, us loving who we were. Us, black is beautiful. That was the thing, and now it's become, black is dirty, it's bad. So I just really encourage each and every one of us, because it's a multifaceted conversation and issue and complex situation. But let's just start bringing, I think Anitra said, the love back, to our families. Let's start having those conversations, with our, children, grandchildren, because it's so needed. And I'll just leave with this. The reason why it's really needed is because when I mentioned I grew up in that bubble, my grandchild hasn't had, he's what, 12 now? He hasn't had an African American teacher. Whereas I knew nothing but African American teachers, he hasn't had one. And he lives in the Beverly area. So it's a different scenario. We got to understand where we are, and we have to start strategizing to bring back, the ways of our old, so to speak.
Okay, we've got a couple of questions here. I've got a comment here to my left, and then a comment over there at the other mic.
Good evening, my name is Jose Wilson. I wanted to I was trying to think how I was going to articulate this. Sometimes my mind gets really excited trying to keep this very condensed. Let me first, though, give a shout out to the public service on the stage. Let's give it up for them. You guys are public service. Something my sister said that really resonated with me. I want to just kind of underscore that just really quick. So I lived in, I'm a transplant to Chicago from Atlanta. So I was raised in the city. I lived southwest Atlanta. I went to school in Wichita, Kansas. I lived there for 6.5 years. I worked for 3 or 4 different national organizations. And I can attest that the same issues that we see in Chicago, they're also being seen in Wichita, Kansas, the largest city in Kansas, in Atlanta, Georgia, and in Chicago. And I believe the underlying condition is that our families have been completely disrupted. And that's been very strategic, that's been very policy driven, and I think it's been very male focused, right? And so I wanted to underscore this very point, is that in order for us to restore, the problems are also very complex. And so when we think about the trauma that our young people are seeing, trauma lives in the body, it stays in our nervous system, it just doesn't go away without processing. And so Dr. Matthews, I know you know as a psychologist, that this stuff, man, can be generational. Dr. Joy DeGroot talks about post-traumatic slave syndrome. So she's connected our current behavior back to the time of slavery, that we're just repeating and regurgitating trauma that's been unprocessed, diagnosed, and dealt with. And so I think that as, I told Patrick, who I love, and I know many of you, but I do know by name Dr. Matthews. I know by name Brother Charles Perry. And it's no disrespect to anybody else, your stories are just phenomenal. And I know by name Patrick Brutus. And so I said, I've never supported a political campaign in my life for a reason. But I said, man, I believe that if we can get resources in the hand of the people who know the people, then that's the start of a solution. Because on this stage right here, man, we don't need to go outside, brother. You've been all over the world. You taking information from Europe. And so we have the genius with us, and somehow, man, we got to figure out how to get what public dollars that are coming into the city back into our community, and trust that we can figure it the heck out. Yes, it's complex, but if we link up together, God's given us the genius, the ability, the passion, the know-how, and the connection. I'm going to close with this. Dr. George Fraser, he says that in America, anything that we need, we can get because the network exists, but we are disconnected. That also has been strategic. We have been challenged. We have challenged Dr. Matthews, Charles, Patrick, and beautiful panelists to figure out how to get connected. Like, that's a challenge, because once we get that piece, we'll be able to battle all the different insidious strategies that have been intentionally designed to just populate our community, keep us disconnected and disorganized. And once we do that, we will win. But we gotta have leaders who believe that, who get that, who know that, to begin to carry that torch. And we must hold up their arms as they do it. And so I stand as a resident of the Greater Grand Chicago community. I've been married to the same woman for the last 33 years. We've raised 5 children. They're scholars working for national corporations. And so this is my home now, and I want to see it change.
And this gentleman is absolutely correct. Patrick was the only person. I've never supported a candidate like this sitting up on the stage, but he was the only person that we sat down, we came up with a plan for the 6th Ward that would work, that's viable. Hey, I'm working with city colleges. They asked me to work with them on their job training programs. Got the FAA involved, and these programs are going to be awesome, coming out soon. But I'm just saying that we need to do like people do with us. Get in the room, close those doors, and come up with a strategic plan to fight a strategic plan. This is a chess game. And we must understand how it's played. Patrick was the only candidate out of those 13 knuckleheads, that actually know the system. Are you going to go down there and work with the mayor? You're going to piss the mayor off. Then you don't get nothing. There's already right now, I can't even get a piece of paper picked up in their ward. We got to think logically, strategically.
Okay, real quick, my name is Cynthia Clark, and I live the next block over. I grew up in Inglewood. I got accepted to Bedlam High School, but I had a sister that didn't get accepted. She was challenged. My mom said, you can't go to Bedlam, you gotta go to Harper with your sister. And I did. And I don't regret it. I graduated valedictorian, went to college. Thought I was special because it was nice over there at Mundelein and Loyola. And every time I had to come home to Inglewood on 68th and Walcott, I was like, why is it so pretty up at the school? It's so messed up over here. And so when I moved away, got my little first apartment in Bronzeville, near Prairie Shores, you know, I thought I was something. So I never wanted to go back because I was traumatized. But in 2005, somebody started teaching me Black history. I'm 53 years old, and I just started learning about my history in 2005. And guess what? You can't stop me from learning about my history right now. It turns me on. It turned Marcus Klein, the founder of Freedom Home Academy, it turned him on. And he over there turning on a whole lot of Black boys and girls, ain't he? So my little recommendation is this. I was on a bus once and I saw a lady pull out a t-shirt with 3 historical Black women. And she showed it to us. And you will not believe the conversation that ensued on the back of the bus on the south side of Chicago about those women. There's a guy named Freddie Taylor. He has a company called Urban Intellectuals. He has Black history cards. I love what Evelyn said before she left when her ride came about giving out the business card. I would love for Patrick to get a little bit of that money and us buy some of those decks of cards, and then we're out in the community. We talk to our shorties about some history. So kick vision and educate. Educate and kick vision. Why do people come up in church? Because they be kicking vision of this big place in the sky. And people come put money in a bucket because people kicking vision. So let's educate. Urban Intellectuals, Black history card. He didn't ask me, I just heard what you said. And I said, ooh, we need to pass these cards out to the kids. So educate and kick vision, educate and kick vision, educate and kick vision to the shorts.
Thank you, Cynthia. Okay. I think we have one more comment or question from our audience here, and then we'll take it back to the panel.
Well, I actually have a question for the panel. Anthony, you touched on something that really hit home for me. Coming from two perspectives, I am a mother of a young child, and I also teach in school buildings. And so when you mentioned that our children are spending most of their time with people outside of the home, and the things that I've seen in these buildings is alarming. You know, the things that teachers are saying to our children, how they're treating our children in these school buildings. And if you don't have a vocal child, they're not going to come home and tell you what that teacher is saying to them. And so another thing that I noticed, there's a lot of talk about social emotional learning when it comes to our children. But what about the adults who are teaching our children? And so it doesn't matter if you're asking a child, well, what would you do if you had $100? What would you do with it and why? Or who could you spend a day with? Anybody in the world and why? If they're having intellectual conversations with their peers and then turning around and being misled by the teacher and being traumatized by their teacher and being ridiculed by their teacher. So my question for those of you who are running for office on the stage is, what sort of solutions can be put into place to act as a preventative measure? Because yeah, it starts at home, but a school building is also home for our children. So what can we do to pour into the adults to prevent them from harming our children, intentionally or not? But sometimes it's not intentional. But if they don't know how to speak to our kids, then they're just gonna keep on going on how they're going. So that's my question.
That's a good question, and thank you. You know, as a public servant, I'm just going to echo two comments that people in the public said, right? We need love, and we also need accountability. I think that's what Brian was talking about, was where's the accountability in our community, right? You know, you do have some people that's burnt out, that's tired, you know, that's hurt, and they just going to continue hurting people, right? You know, and that's just going to continue being a cycle. You have a lack of self-love, of black love, of love for your community, right? You know, we talk about how dirty our neighborhoods are, but yet, you know, all people throwing trash and things like that. But yet, if we don't have any garbage cans on every block, like the north side and downtown does, then where do you think people are going to throw those things at? You know, if we don't have curriculum in the classrooms that's educating people about Kwanzaa and Juneteenth and Black history, and why is it in February? You know, because Frederick Douglass' birthday is in February, as well as Abraham Lincoln. You know, that's why it's in February. You know, as well as the Black Wall Street. I'm working with an organization called the Woodlawn Diversity Action. We had a Black Wall Street event this past summer. We're going to be having it again in September on the 2nd, the first Saturday. But if we're not about loving our culture and our heritage and where we came from, we're not going to know where we're heading to. We're not going to even know where we're at right now. So yes, you know, the home is an issue. But if the institutions and the organizations in our neighborhoods are not funded correctly, are not structured correctly, then they're going to continue to break the homes. The homes don't stand a chance if the institutions, organizations, and businesses in the neighborhood are not adequate and they're not funded and operated by us, right? Because I heard what Brian was talking about with some of the different populations that's coming to Chicago, but we need to have some type of ownership in everything, even in our politics. I understand politics may scare some of you all. Like, well, you know, I don't, you know, if you're a candidate, I don't care about you. You know what I'm saying? But it's like you need to know who the people are running in where you live, whether it's your ward, your district, and your city, because your decision is going to determine all of our future. And if we're not looking to vote and be politically educated for all of us, then what are we doing, right? So I'll leave it on there, you know.
Thank you. Okay, we could talk about this all night, and I think we're just really getting warmed up. But we want to be respectful of everyone's time. So I'm going to give everyone on our panel here an opportunity just for their closing statements. Before that, though, I have one final comment. I have two final comments and/or questions from our audience. We're going to limit that answer to about 20 seconds apiece. And 20 seconds.
I'll be brief. First, it's good to see all of you, and you know you're going to work with everybody to make it happen. Thank you. The police, we got 2.6 million people in Chicago and 11,000 police. So the police are not the answer, we just don't have enough of them. We need a cultural shift as a people so that we police ourselves. We have a base, a demographic between the ages of about 13 and about 17 that are committing crimes all over the north side, jacking cars, you name it. And why? Because they're disenfranchised and they want what Madison Avenue is selling. They want the iPhones, they want the cars, they want the lifestyle. And so what we need is a return to something I remember as a kid. We need those same companies to be in the high schools and give these kids opportunities for internships and or whatever they need so that they can acquire those things that they want, the dreams, the life, without having to take it from somebody else. So that's something to take into consideration. We need to spend more time listening to the kids again. Don't disconnect from them, embrace them. Then, let's see. So that's something that I'd like to see us move towards. And then if a community, in and of themselves, develops a technique to resolve an issue, support them and let them do it. I live in Inglewood, and about 2 years ago we had an epic summer. The gang members, the shooters, put their guns down and grabbed paintball guns, and they was running through the streets just gunning each other down. They put their real guns down, and they picked up these paintballs. The wars were epic, yeah, did a certain amount of property damage. The people were alive at the end of it. And then the police came in and took the paintball guns. So they went back to shoot each other. Go figure. So I say, if a community has a solution, embrace that solution, whatever it is to the problem. Bond with the kids again and give them what they need so they can get what they want without stealing. Go back to the schools and then get the schools to align with corporate America. Corporate America is in there. And the kids can get the training they need to be a part of the dream. And so that's what I'd like to see happen. And I know you guys can do it with prayer. I'm out.
Thank you. Okay, I think I have one final community comment, and then the panel can go ahead and
Hi, I'm Colleen Allen. I live in the Area 6 District. We're part of what's called, I don't know if anyone's here, part of Chatham United. Okay, Chatham United, we're about 200 to 250 residents. It has expanded from 87. It goes as far as 79th right now. It goes from State Street to King Drive. My suggestion is we have the alderperson's canvas in our area, saturating it. We know nothing about the people that are running for any other offices. I've seen nothing. This is all that I've received. That is an area that is ripe. We have video cameras. We share it while things are going on. We have our gentleman that's going through the community and cutting down branches and trees. We have our community members walking seniors home, monitoring them as you're going along. We are old school community. I had a car accident. I had people taking me to the doctor. I had people been bringing me food. It's absolutely amazing when people come over there to do construction. They're just like, oh my God, we didn't know you all existed. So you guys are missing a major, major market. We know nothing about any other offices other than the older people. So you guys may want to tap into that.
Can you say your name again for us?
I'm sorry?
Can you say your name again for us?
Colleen Halleman.
Okay.
I was invited by Ms. Montez there.
And the name of the organization?
Chatham United. Chatham United, okay? And I'm gonna actually put something in our, we have a group meet and we can put things in non-stop. And I'll mention I came here and that I mentioned that we know nothing about anyone else that's running. There may be something that you all want to consider. So if you all have anything other than these two that I have, I would appreciate it. Either forwarding it to me or something of that nature, so that at least we can have a list of people that we can individually research.
And Colleen, I'll get you a list also. I'll get you a list as well. Thank you. Over here, I'm going to give you about 20 seconds.
Well, first of all, I'm just saying I'm back to this neighborhood. I spent the last 12 years on the west side in the Austin community doing work over there. We made a lot of changes. And so my thing is to bring those changes over here into this area. One thing I want folks to understand, I grew up in a time where everybody knew who lived on their block. And I'm talking about 3-story apartment buildings, right? Not just homes, but it was apartment buildings, and you knew everyone on the block. And when there was trouble with a family on the block, they would have something called a rent party. I don't know, y'all might be too young to remember that, but it was a rent party to keep that family in their home and to help with whatever the issues were. And I see that we've gotten away from that. So we have to bring neighbor back to neighborhood, and that it's not the hood, it's neighborhood, and we have to bring neighbor back to the hood, and that's going to take all of us. It can't just be few or the elected officials or those running for office. It has to be all of us, and we have to check on our neighbors.
I think I wrote my senior thesis on holistic community development. So along with doing the housing, I also raised $350,000 for seniors. And I asked the mayor at that time, I said, well, why isn't it more elected officials trying to tap into this money to help the seniors who are living on a fixed income, they need a new roof and porch? He said, because they don't care. And there's no, you burn political fuel, there's no reward in it. I think that we have opportunity now to have an alderman that don't care about that. So not only do our community need one thing, two things, three things, we need everything. And we have to sit down in a room and figure that out, how we are going to get what we need holistically.
David Boykin, candidate 6th Ward Police District Council, 6th Police District Council. Ideologically speaking, I'm a black revolutionary. When Cynthia spoke about coming into black consciousness, awareness of self, the reason I'm running for this position is being in the mindset that I am and finding out about the position. ECPS, Coalition of Organizations, came together and fought for years for this ECPS ordinance that created the council. Them coming together, they came together with the impetus of the killing of Rakia Boyd, the killing of Laquan McDonald by the police, and the desire for accountability of the police. The impetus for this council, from my understanding, is about police accountability. It's about black people having control over how their communities are policed. Seeing Frank Chapman speak about ECPS and the district councils and the struggle for control, community control of police, and taking it back to the historical struggle to that point of like Reconstruction into slavery, right? When we talk about slavery, black people, how we got to, why we here, right? Because, you know, we were victims of the transatlantic slave trade. We were captured Africans enslaved here in America. That's why we're here, right? Then nobody asked us if we wanted to stay when they so-called let us free. But we still here, right? And when they so-called freed us with the 14th Amendment, there was an exception in there for criminals, right? Criminals can still be enslaved. He said, you free except for, you know, so they gotta have it. Slavery never ended. Slavery still exists. You know, you got the prison industrial complex. You still got slaves, right? That has to keep going. But the reason that we're here tonight, and thank you, Brother Patrick, so much for inviting us and providing the space. We're talking about public safety from the perspective of crimes in our community, right? And mostly crimes in our community committed by ourselves against each other, right? And the brother here, Mr. Crawford, he didn't come out and say it. He implied a lot when he said that it starts in the home. He implied, I wish he would have said something more to make it plain. But and my gut response to what he said was that, like, yeah, that's true. Technically speaking, it does, you know, does sound home. But what do these homes look like? And why do these homes look like that? You know what I'm saying? And that goes back to economic disparity. And we look at these charts, you know, these numbers of, you know, the violence and the spikes over the years. And the brother talked about that this is not just Chicago, this is like, you know, nationwide. And I always wondered, you know, do we see the same correlation with respect to the economic disparity? When people study, social scientists study, you know, crime, there's a direct correlation with the economic disparity. Like you know, less money you have, the poorest communities, you know, you have the most, you know, violent, you know, crime that just goes hand in hand. We talk about trying to get resources and accessing millions of dollars, and for this program, for that program, for this program, whatever. Community investment, economic development, invest Southwest, all these things invest and put money in the community, but they don't put the money in the people in the community. They put money in the physical structures in the community. They put money in the program in the community. They're not putting money in the pockets of the people in the community. The only thing come close to that is what Grand Lightfoot just did recently with a $500 guaranteed income, you know. And there's an outcry by a lot of people against that because you feel like that's like welfare and you're giving people money who don't even want to work or something, right?
That's me.
We're trying to solve.
I know what you're trying to do. We just don't have enough time.
Right, we ain't got enough time to solve the world problem. We're talking about revolution. And your answer is revolution.
Thank you.
Yeah, we passed it down. So I'm not running for office. You know, there's a lot of good conversation here tonight, and I would just challenge everybody who's here. You can't just have this be a conversation that's happening because of a aldermanic race or a council race. These things have to be happening on a regular. So many things I'm connected with, you know, just being, you know, a student of history and spirituality ever since I was, you know, a very young man. But we have to understand as people who live in Park Manor and Chatham, when we talk about the forces that were happening against us in this area, you know, it's just part of a wider situation, and it's not just like the gentleman said in Atlanta and, you know, happening all across, but this is something that's been happening for the last 2,000 years. Ever since your ancestors in the Nile Valley created civilizations and came up with a culture that never had a police system for over 2,000 years, but had harmony and, you know, cooperation and collaboration that had wondrous things. I mean, people talk about how great the pyramids were, and they are, they're phenomenal. The Sphinx and all that, but what was the beauty was the culture that our ancestors built. And when the Greeks and everybody came along that and they were jealous of it and vowed to do everything they could, it's been a war against African people for 2,000 plus years. And if you think I'm lying, you know, go and look up the Berlin Conference. And you probably don't know what that is. The Berlin Conference was when all the major European nations came together and they divided up Africa. And they did. They did exactly what they planned. You know, Belgium got, you know, King Leopold, and I don't know if anybody wants to read a really good book, it's called King Leopold's Curse, because King Leopold took over the Congo area where all the rubber was, and at that time, rubber was so important for the economy because that was the beginning, prior to the automotive age, and where would automotive be without tires, right? But King Leopold was so ruthless in that area, if you didn't bring back enough rubber at the end of the day, your hand was cut off. And if you go and Google King Leopold right now, on Google, you'll see a bunch of Africans with no hands. But that's just part from apartheid and everything else right to, they want this land back in Chad. Don't be mistaken. Nobody would have ever dreamed that Brooklyn, New York would be white. Nobody would have ever dreamed that Harlem would be white. So if you don't think that they have their eyes on this community, that's like footsteps from the expressway, skip steps away from Lakeshore Drive, they can get easier to work versus living out in Schaumburg and having to come into the city. They want this area back. So we have to come together on a regular to talk about what we can do to infuse, and I'll just say another thing. We have to, I heard somebody mention Marcus Klein. We have to go back to independent schools, guys. And that's what I was just asking Patrick. There used to be a time when Shiloh had their own K to 8th grade, right here, when I was a kid. And you have to have these schools that are infusing our kids with the message that you want them to have, because just like the young lady said here, it's not happening in the Chicago public schools. It's just not. So, and it's by design.
Again, Jim Blissett III is the name, and we just diagnose the issues. We see it clearly. We have been under an assault for generations now, but I want us to remember, we've made tremendous strides, and we must continue to learn from our successes and make sure we are duplicating those successes accordingly. So let's not forget how far we have come, how great we are as a people. Always lead with greatness, always lead with love, and we will continue to work our way out of the hole, because we have done that continuously. I just want to remind you all, right? We are in the era of legalized cannabis, and I'm gonna say it in the church. Our kids are smoking loud, and they don't know what's in it. So as we try to figure out what's going on in the streets, there's a chemical assault. And we must hold our leaders accountable for what's happening with these substances that are coming into our bodies. We must have efficient testing of cannabis. As cannabis dispensaries enter our community, we must control that. And we're going to see issues of increased public safety concerns once these cannabis dispensaries enter. I want to be at the table when we have these discussions. I want to be at the table when we're talking about social consumption lounges and how that can alleviate some of the issues we're seeing with cannabis being consumed on the L, on the bus, in the park, outside the school. So let's keep the chemical assault in mind. Furthermore, law enforcement, it is a viable career pathway. We must see it as an issue of labor. I've worked in the public school sector related to post-secondary planning, and we must shift that conversation as we see law enforcement. We must prepare a new generation of community-focused leaders in law enforcement, whatever we want to call it, whether we call it policing, mental health intervention, whatever we call it, we must take control of the post-secondary planning and produce new officers from the millennials, the Gen Zers, the founders. There's a new day, and we must control it while seeing ourselves as great and operating out of love. So Jim Blizzard III is the name, thirdpolicedistrict.com. Check me out, support me February 28th, vote for me. And let's not forget about write-in candidates. We have 2 candidates on the ballot in the 6th. So they have a pathway to winning, but there's 1 seat still standing. Let's not allow the FOP to co-opt that seat. We need write-in candidates who are going to stand up and chatter throughout the 6th, who will come to this from a perspective of community, love, and unity. So write-in candidates to support Brother Boykins and Eric Russell as they work to uplift our community.
Thank you, Jim. I would just like quickly to comment, on the lady's comment, about schools and teachers. I think one way to tackle that problem is to have teachers in the local schools who are also living in that community. And perhaps that is something what the city, officials, and the local, governments can help you do it, like Patrick. Patrick maybe can, pledge that he will find a way how to, enable teachers to live in communities where they are working. That way we can maybe ensure teachers are culturally sensitive, to the people they are teaching, right? And that they are also familiar with the troubles, and the traumas those kids are, experiencing, in their home. Because teacher is not just teaching, we all know. It goes much beyond that. Anyway, so we heard so much collective wisdom tonight in this room, and I think we are all flowing toward the same direction. So I really do hope and I do pledge to bring this collective wisdom into action, because we need to do a lot of work and to change a lot of things. So we also all know that without personal, dignity and equal access to the justice, and safety, moreover, there is no prosperity. So that is a basis. And I would just like to leave you with the words of one woman that I greatly admire, Angela Davis. I bet you all know about her. So she said something that guided me a lot through my life. And she said, I'm no longer accepting the things I cannot change. I'm changing the things I cannot accept. So thank you all for listening. My name is Anna Sofkovic. I'm running for the 3rd Police District, and I do hope you will vote for me. Thank you.
This was a really great, I had a great time. You guys, are you having a great time? One thing that I really want to stress on the cycle of violence and the cycle of community trauma that has been going on, and what my takeaway is from here. We must continue to remember, I was born in the back in a couple of decades ago, right? And yes, my teachers came from our community. Yes, my family's teacher came from our community. But one thing that didn't come from our community was the division. Division that was caused between an outside entity that knew that our community was diamonds, gems, and pearls. And to take the strong leaders and the attributes out of our community from the 80s and the 90s. And now we have weapons of mass destruction. We have mental illness as a pandemic, you know, and the worst part of it all is that in our CPS unit, our children and our teachers are taught to lie about the history of who and whose we are as a people, as African American, right? So when I look at the trauma of our children, and this community meeting is very important, and I understand what our children cannot get past the 7th and the 8th grade because there's something that is in front of them called the Constitution that shows the injustice throughout the amendments. So as I ran for Congress in the 1st District, and I ran for Congress not because that seat was so prestigious, that seat was so abused, and our people were so abused by that seat. And now it's a time to change. And I know you guys remember what happened in the 1st District of the congressional seat with Bobby Rush and the other aldermen that have been before in this 6th District, and other people that have served on the community of peace servants. They failed us. Look at what's happening. I cannot go another voting cycle seeing that there's 20 candidates on an automatic seat, let alone a mayor seat. It's so unacceptable. I remember having Medea in her lingerie shop that was named after me. She had powwows like this, and when there was more than 5 candidates in the community, they was chopping that mess down. No, this is what we're gonna do, this is how we're gonna tackle it, and this is what's gonna happen at the CPS level. Those were the strongholds that I was taught upon, and I can never forget. And one thing that I see every 4 years, every 6 years, we forget. We quickly, our elders quickly forget, and I'm an elder now too, and I can't forget. I have to continue to pave the way of truth, of love, of peace, of freedom and justice, and I hope that this is what this collaboration is about, because if it is, I'm on board. If it is, call me. I don't care what time of the night. I'm on 75th and St. Lawrence, making sure that the space that we have over there is walkable, making sure that it is not shootable, making sure that our children can move back and forth from Tanner, back and forth from 79th Street, and give our stakeholders cabbage and lettuce and green tomatoes and eggs from Maggie, Mr. Johnson, and hot sauce. That's what I'm here to do. My name is Dr. Rena Matthews, and I am a community service. I am your community servant. I am in the trenches. You can have my number, my email, whatever. Let's make sure this gem of Woodlawn, Greater Chatham, Park Manor is preserved for my grandchildren, for my great-grandchildren, for my legacy. I'm depending on you. I'm just one vote. I need all of you all to vote for righteous in our community. Thank you guys so much. God bless you. Have a wonderful holiday.
Really? She tried, like, she tried to do it like that. And I'm like, well, have a good night, y'all. You know what? Thank you for this conversation. I have so many thoughts, but I'm just going to share a few of them. I'm a firm believer that a majority of the assets we need to cure our communities are already there, right? We don't really need to go outside, maybe for information, but not for the assets we actually need. I'm a firm believer in that. But I also believe, I think, when we actually can come together and embrace our neighbors, right? As a candidate, there's so many houses I can't get to because there's a locked fence. And they're not locked to keep me out specifically. They're locked to keep out their neighbors. That's a problem, right? And then once we can embrace our neighbors, and then we can actually like talk to our youth, not shy away from them in fear, right? Then our community, this is when we start to see our shifts. And then once we come together and we all, I mean, I'll speak specifically for Inglewood, the voting there is in the 20%, mid-20s. I want to get into the mid-60s and 70s, right? Because once we get there, then we can demand, right? Once you got that much political power, you're making demands, right? And that's where I want to get as a community. That's a little bit out of the purview of the district council, but let me assure you, we talk about this all the time. We are trying to build power and change, because on top of that, we now have this position now where we can try really hard, right? I grew up a few years after the assassination of Fred Hampton, when what John Burge was doing was rumor in the street, right? So now we have a chance to try to move our police, like, that door will never be closed. But we can start to make some real, true, definite, life-lasting change in how our city is policed, how our communities are policed, right? And then try to move our police department from a purely reactive force to a proactive community partner, which is totally different than what we have right now. And I would be honored to be one of the people to usher that change in and to start to usher all of our community together to get to that point where we have the power, the voice. And just one last thing. I love her. We need like 30 more, right? We talk about youth like they're like this thing, but we don't have them in the room, in the conversation. I yell at my boss about this all the time. I said, any event before 5 o'clock is of no use to the people we want to connect with, right? Not necessarily out over here, but we have to have youth in these conversations. We have to. And I told some kids the other day, they were like in their mid-20s. I said, if y'all ran, I can go sit home in a warm apartment. So let's get it together. But thank you all so much for this conversation. Thank you, Patrick. And my name is Deon McGill. I'm running in the 7th Police District. And please, if you have friends in Inglewood, don't tell them to vote for me. Tell them to come find me, call me, email me, and I'll convince them. So I appreciate you.
I would just like to echo some of the things my colleagues have said up here. Thank you all for being here, right? These type of events, these type of spaces are crucial and important. My name is Anthony David Bryant. I'm running for the local police district in the 3rd district. And the only reason why I'm saying it again, because the work I've done, I've been doing this work since I was 14. A couple of weeks ago, I just turned 29. So, you know, I hope to, when I get to their age, I hope that my hair comes back. So, if I continue to do this work. But I just wanted to say, like, yes, some of these organizations, these centers, these places, they're present, they're doing the work, right? If you don't know about them, now's the time to look them up. The Workers Center for Racial Justice, Black Liberation Organization, they do work on the city level, the state level, they also do work in Wisconsin. Sunshine Ministry, they do work with youth development, violence prevention. Project Hood, that's a part of New Beginnings Church. They do work with violence prevention, youth development, you name it, a whole bunch of services. And that's just a few other organizations that I've named. But I'm pretty sure that us up here, as well as you all in the audience, need to come together to coordinate a lot of these community organizations' efforts. Because at the end of the day, there's a system that's been around longer than all of us adding up our ages together. That's been around, co-conspirators and co-conspiring against us to make sure that we don't know about something like the Empowering Communities for Public Safety. Because that's what ECPS is, right? And I'm pretty sure your police officer, your police district hasn't been educating people about that, right? Because this is about community oversight of the police. That's the office that we're running for. And we're not running for this office because we're going to get 6 figures. You know, we're running for this office because this work matters to us. These are community members. These are not politicians running for office. I'm not a politician. We are community members running for office to ensure that our voice, our input is at the decision-making table. So I'm pretty sure we all have information out that we would love to pass to you all as we're wrapping up. Thank you all so much for coming out. Thank you, Patrick, for inviting us and hosting this event. I was just talking to some of my colleagues and I was like, man, who's running in the 6? Like, who's a good people? You know what I'm saying? Like I want to connect to all the people that are running in the 6. So thank you so much, Patrick. I think you was one of the first. So I'll put that up to you. So thank you all.
All right, well, thank you very much. I'll take that as an endorsement. This mic is not working. Brian earlier said $60 billion. The CPS budget is $10.4 billion. The CPD budget is $1.9 billion. And the city budget is $16.4 billion. That's a lot of money. That's a lot of opportunity for us to get it right. You know, what you hear tonight was a lot of ideas that came from us, but we heard a lot of input from you all. And I think what we have is the beginning of a community plan that we could work on together. Okay, I'm standing here with a bunch of individuals who have come together tonight to figure out how to make our community safer, more walkable, and a place that we all want to live. I will stand with anyone who has that as a vision to improving our lives. And so that's why I'm running for alderman. That's why I have no concern about who's doing what behind me, because I know these people, and you heard it for yourselves this evening, they care about this neighborhood. They care about our people. They care about this community. I will stand with anybody. And I know that everybody is looking, and you know, some people I don't know. I've had the pleasure of meeting a lot of you, and there are some people watching online right now. But when people stare at me, guess what I do? I stare back. I stare back, right? Because I want you to see what I see. And I see that this community cares. I want you to see that I'm working hard. I see that this community wants to move forward, and I want you to see that I'm working hard to do that. I'm working really hard to be the alderman, as much as these folks are working harder in the community, working hard to represent you at the police council, working hard to make sure that we have the right kind of vision to take us forward into the future. With that being said, again, I'm Patrick Brutus. I'm running for alderman in the 6th Ward. I hope that's not a secret. I hope you tell your friends. I hope you get some information about not only me, but all of us here this evening. And I'm thankful that you all came. Last point, I'm very excited to hear that tonight everybody here is looking at education and looking at economics as part of the foundation of our societal problems that challenge us in these neighborhoods. And I want to let you know right now that this is the first of a listening series. The January meeting will be held on the 12th, and that'll be on education, so it's timely. And the February one will be held on February 12th, and that's going to be on economic development. 9th. So we're going to February 9th. February 9th. Thank you. That's Cindy. Okay. Thank you. All right. So January 12th, education. We're going to talk about it. We're going to have another town hall. We're going to have some other educators here. I'm going to be reaching out to some of the schools, because there is no way that Ruggles shouldn't be as great as Leonard. There is no reason why Tanner shouldn't be as great as McDade. There's no reason why our children have to take these super duper exams just to get out of our neighborhood to go to a school somewhere else. And we'll be talking about economic development in February. Again, the election is February 28th. I encourage you all to vote. I encourage you all to be informed. I encourage you all to be vigilant. And last but not least, I want to thank my wife and my daughter, one of my kids, who are both here tonight. And that's why I'm fighting to be the alderman here in this neighborhood. Thank you for joining us this evening. We'll see you at the next
Punch number 3 on February 28th. Number 3.